But we're here today to talk about getting back to in-person gatherings. And as we did the survey, which we're very grateful for all of those who filled in, we came up with some possible suggestions. But before we get into that, here's the things that we're trying to hold in tension. The first verse, principle from the Bible, command even, remind the people to be subject to rulers and authorities, to be obedient, to be ready to do whatever is good. We want to obey the government where it's appropriate for us to do so, and we think it was entirely appropriate for us to shut down our in-person gatherings as we did almost 6 months ago now. We were obeying the authorities and we were doing what was good, we believe. So we're holding that intention with this. Let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. And here's the key bit: not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. We are to be people who meet together, to be physically present with each other. That because it spurs each other on, because it encourages each other, especially all the more as we see that day of Jesus' return coming. So we are to be people who meet together, but we're also to be obedient to rulers and authorities. As the rulers and authorities have now said it is okay for us to get back together in some form, we want to be able to do that as well. So here's the other options that were suggested in some of the survey things that were shared, some of the comments. Some people suggested that we could meet outdoors maybe. However, the problems with the guidelines are actually that we're more restricted meeting outdoors than we are indoors. Indoors, we can have as many people as our building will take at 2 meter distance, but outdoors we're restricted to 30. So bizarrely, although the spread of the virus is less likely outdoors, we are more restricted outdoors than indoors. So that's not really an option. Small groups, could we just meet in small groups? Well, small groups are currently restricted to bubbles. So inside your houses, you can only meet in bubbles of up to 4 households. And that doesn't really work with our small group system, or with any small group system, realistically anyway. So that really isn't an option either. Is there another venue that we could try to use? Could we find a bigger hall that would enable us to have the whole church gathering together? The problem with that is the difficulty of hiring under the current circumstances. Many church plants are discovering that they cannot use the venues that they're used to using because with the risks of coronavirus, people don't want to hire out their building. So it could be a possibility if we could find somewhere to hire, but for the short-term future, that's not what we're going to go with. There are various restrictions that we've been given for an in-person gathering. So here are some of those. We're not allowed to sing, and we're not allowed to use it as an excuse for social interaction. So we're not allowed to just have a chat with other people who come to church. It's there for the act of the service, the act of worship, and for nothing else. So no singing, no interaction. We're also limited by space and numbers. As we said, we're only allowed as many as we can realistically fit within our building at a 2 meter distance. And because of that limited space, we are therefore limited by numbers. Now that depends, there's a lot of variables in this, but we've worked out that the very maximum we could fit in our building is around about 45 to 50. So that is the absolute limit of our building. That's the limit in terms of our numbers. Other restrictions are that there are various precautions that have to be followed in order to avoid spreading the virus, and all of those precautions have been implemented in the plans that we've come up with. But the government actually encourage us to carry on doing some form of online worship, whether it's streaming or what it is. So what we've decided is that the online worship that we're currently doing is going to carry on exactly as it is. So that will be carrying on. Necessary measures that we have to have in place, spatial distancing, as we've mentioned, of 2 meters, that carries on. Unlike in England, where you're allowed to be less than 2 meters so long as you have certain precautions in place, like a face mask, we are still restricted by 2 meters. Now, whether or not you agree doesn't matter. We've got to be subject to the authorities that we have. So spatial distancing of 2 meters always still applies. Those with symptoms are not to attend. And this is very important. If you have a cough, a continuous cough, if you have a fever, if your sense of smell or taste has either changed or disappeared, then you are not to attend. And we need to be very strict with that, because there is a very good chance that you might have coronavirus if you are having those symptoms. Hand sanitizing is required upon entry and exit. They actually encourage hand washing proper in a running water and with soap. But obviously that's impossible given where our entrance is and where our sinks are. So hand sanitizing is therefore required upon entry and exit of the building. If we have any responses in the service, we do have responses at very least with our men, but sometimes we might have some kind of liturgical response where the congregation joins in with something that we're saying. For example, some of the creeds that we do say from time to time, the Lord's Prayer, or sometimes we read a psalm together. We're still permitted to do that so long as we have lowered voices. So you can't raise your voice and speak up in order to say the Lord's Prayer or whatever else we're doing together. Here's some encouraged measures. Wearing of masks. This is something we as elders are encouraging for you as a congregation. It is not mandatory by the government. We are not making it mandatory to attend church with a mask, but we would encourage that, not because it protects you, but because it stops you spreading it if you have the virus without realizing it. So we would encourage the wearing of masks. And actually the survey said that the majority of people would wear a mask anyway. So we do encourage wearing masks. People at risk, they are advised to minimize their contact with people within the guidelines for attending a place of worship. And that still stands. However, the government also recognizes that it may be more beneficial for people to attend a place of worship than to not, given mental health, well-being, and we would say our spiritual well-being as well. So people who are at risk are advised not to attend. However, there may be good reasons for you to attend even if you are at risk. And everyone has got to make that call for themselves. One thing we would say is no one is required to attend if they are anxious about being there. This is something the government says as well in their recommendations, that no one should feel pressured to attend a place of worship. I think that's what they say, something like that. But we want that kind of spirit to be there as well, that if you do feel at risk by attending church, or if you're anxious about it, then don't feel obliged to be there. That's why we're carrying on giving the online worship as we are, well, one of the reasons anyway, so that anyone who doesn't feel able to attend doesn't have to. The statistics we got from the survey were that around 60% will be back as soon as possible, but around about, I think it was 15% probably won't be back until the whole pandemic is over anyway. And that is absolutely fine. If people want to wait until the whole thing is over, then by all means, please do, because we don't want you to feel at risk. Here's something we encourage: bring your own Bible. They discourage us from handing out Bibles or notice sheets or anything anything that we hand out, really. So we encourage you to bring your own Bible. If you feel you might need a drink in the middle of the service, whether that's a glass of water just to ease you, or you can bring a flask of coffee or whatever else you fancy. I'm not sure we're allowed alcohol in the building, so there we go. That was more of a joke. But bring a drink if you feel you would like a drink in a flask or in a bottle, something like that. And that's because we don't want to be handing out water. We don't want to be supplying it. We don't want to encourage moving around the building once you're in the building as well, as much as possible. So we are making plans for the first 3 weeks and only the first 3 weeks. The reason being that we want to review as we go. So we thought if we make plans for the first 3 weeks, then we can review and change and adapt. So it's not that we're only going to open for 3 weeks and then shut down again, unless we're encouraged to do so, but that this is the plan for the first 3 weeks, which will then be tweaked and amended as required. So for the first 3 weeks, we are only going to have one morning service. That will probably be more of a long-term thing because of the pandemic, of course, but that is our current situation. So we're only going to have one morning service, and that is because if we were going to have an evening service, we would have to clean in between, plus the extra pressures it adds to those who are serving and the requirements that we need to follow. Having one morning service for the meantime seems like the best option to us, as we have been doing anyway with our online worship. We're going to carry on having our communion on Zoom once a month. There are various issues, restrictions upon having communion in person, but because our communion on Zoom seems to be working well, we're going to carry on doing it in that way. We're also going to carry on our prayer meeting on Zoom. Again, to hold it midweek would be very challenging, but also our prayer meeting has been working very well on Zoom, and so we're going to carry on in that manner. And all the other groups that happen midweek will still remain closed down for the meantime. Again, you've got the challenges of cleaning and of social distancing for these groups. You'd have to have a booking system for each of those groups so you know exactly who's coming, so you know you're not going to overfill the building, whatever meeting we are having. So all other groups will remain closed down for the meantime as well. Also, for the first 3 weeks, we're going to be restricted to 30 booked in attendees. Although we've said that the building can hold 45, if everyone who came along was single, a single person, a single household, then we wouldn't be able to fit 30 single people in. So, so there are challenges to fitting everyone in. It depends on your group size. But also we want to allow a bit of breathing room for in case we have people turn up who haven't booked, especially if they're guests, you know, people who are seeking. We want to be able to allow them to come as well. We're encouraging people to come to one of the 3 weeks for the first 3 weeks of the in-person gatherings. And that is so that everyone gets a chance to be there in person. We worked on the basis that during the course of a month, we probably have around 150 different people attending a service in church. And if 60% are likely to be back straight away, then in order to get that 60% of the 150 in, we would need to spread across 3 weeks if we were aiming for 30 people every week. So that's the reason for doing it in that way. We might find that we've been too cautious, in which case we can adapt and change as necessary. But certainly for the first 3 weeks, just come to one of those 3 weeks and use the booking system in order to book in for one of those 3 weeks. It will be a short service. We're aiming for it to be certainly less than 45 minutes if we can. We don't want it to be, it needs to be as short as possible according to the government guidelines. So it will be short. The online worship, as it has been happening, has been around 45 minutes usually, depending on who's leading, of course. But we will carry on having a short service, and there won't be any children's groups. So there won't be any trailblazers or creche. The government has only just produced guidelines for children's groups within a church service. So that might be something that could happen in the future now that the government are allowing it. But certainly for the meantime, for the first 3 weeks, we'll run without any children's groups, and therefore they have to stay in for the whole service for the sermon as well. The content of the in-person worship will be very similar to the online worship. We'll have a singer to sing a couple of the songs that have been chosen for the online worship. It'll be the same passage read, probably using the same videos even, and the sermon will be delivered in person, which will be on the same, essentially the same as the pre-recorded one for the online worship as well. Here's an idea of the seating plan, where people can sit and yet still remain at 2 meter distance. This is one that Steve has put together, which is more accurate than the one that I put together that you would have seen on Sunday, because Steve went there with a big 2 meter stick to check it out. So that's a rough idea of the seating plan. The blue seats are the ones that are in that row but not to be used, and the grey ones are obviously not to be used at all. So the yellow seats are where we're aiming for that people can actually sit. So according to different group size, the stewards will have to direct people to the appropriate seats. So that's a rough idea of the seating plan. Again, this isn't, you know, this isn't particular. We might be able to get more in if required, if people squeeze up. Some protocols. Your entry is going to be directed by stewards. We've briefly mentioned that, but as you come into the building, someone will direct you where to sit and yeah, tell you where you can go. Steward outside the building, or at least as you come in, one steward inside to direct you to your seat, and then one steward, as we'll come on to, by the toilet as well. There we go, 2 things up at once. We are to exit promptly as soon as we are done. This is something the government has put in place, that we avoid making too much contact with people. And there will be a one-way system in place as well. So you'll have to adhere to the directions of the one-way system. So hope you can abide by that. Here's some more protocols for us to follow. There will be screens for the person who is singing. As we said, we're allowed to have one person singing at any one time. And there will also be a screen for the preacher, and that's to obviously stop the spread of the virus as much as is possible. The unusable seats will be marked off as those seats that you can't sit in. Yeah, you'll have to make sure you don't sit in a seat that has been marked off. Don't sit in this seat. It's pretty straightforward. And then there will be floor markings and posters. Floor markings to show the direction of travel into and out of the building, and then posters as well, advising people not to attend if they have symptoms and so on. Some more protocols. Outside of the building, there will be a 2 meter system, a 2 meter queue system. Obviously, if we're trying to get people into the building in a calm and measured manner, then there might be a build-up of a queue, in which case there will be floor markings outside to say 2 meters, so you don't, you know, compromise that. The alley that runs alongside the Conway yard, that will be off limits. So you can't enter, you can't come down the alley that runs along the Conway yard. It's closed off because obviously you can't see around the corners. It's more narrow and therefore could compromise the 2 meters. So if you park in the car park, you need to walk all the way around the pavement, down the steps, to the main entrance of the building. And I forgot to say, that's the way that you'll go into the building, is through the old main entrance in the graveyard, and then you'll travel through the building to the door that goes through into the car park, the hall exit, shall we say. Next thing to say is that we will be cleaning after 72 hours. Now, the reason for this is because the virus remains live on a surface for 72 hours. So if we're cleaning before 72 hours, we're putting the cleaners at risk. So we're asking those who clean, and we're giving an appeal for cleaners who can clean on a Wednesday between 12 and before Thursday at a 9 a.m. And And the reason for asking them to clean at that very narrow window is that then anyone who comes to clean who might have the virus won't then be spreading it to someone else afterwards as well. So we've got a very narrow window of Wednesday 12 noon until Thursday 9 a.m. That's the narrow window in which to clean, and that's to reduce the risk as much as possible of spreading the virus. The building is not to be accessed midweek. Now, obviously, lots of people have keys, and if someone comes into the building at a time when it's not expected or not known, then that again risks the virus being spread into the building. So if someone does need to access the building midweek, then please let myself or Steve or one of the other elders or deacons know, ask permission to use the building rather than just presuming you can go in and grab whatever it is that you need to. And you will be allowed if you need to, but obviously precautions then need to be taken. Children, big question. Children, well, their parents probably need to print and bring the sermon worksheets. For those that are old enough to use the sermon worksheets, then bring your own so that they can engage in what is being done, and hopefully they continue to prove to be useful. Bring a lollipop or other snack. A lollipop is particularly good because they take a long time to be sucked to completion, and they remain in the mouth a long time. And therefore their mouths are closed around the lollipop. So that's a good way of keeping them quiet. Or if you don't approve of lollipops, then any other healthy version of a lollipop or any other kind of snack will be just fine as well. So long as they're not too noisy. You know, popping candy might be off limits, but there we go. Children's talk will happen. If we see that there are children present, we'll be prepared to engage them with what we're talking about as well, because they have missed out a lot by not having children's talks, and there's been various reasons for not doing those. But if we do see children there, we will give a children's talk. Me and Brian will have plenty of them up our sleeves, ready to pull out at a moment's notice. Toilets. This is another big area of yes, concern. We are to minimize using the toilet wherever possible. And part of the advantage of having a short service is that it's less likely that someone will need the toilet. But in order to minimize that further, we'd encourage you to try and use the toilet before you come to the service. And if you can hold it, then please do, if you don't mind me saying. I hope that's not too inappropriate. The only toilet that will be in use is the disabled toilet, and that's because that's the easiest one to manage. It's obviously a unisex toilet as well. There's only one person in that toilet at a time, or two if you're assisting a child. So that helps us in minimizing the potential for compromising the 2-meter distancing. So it's only the disabled toilet in use, and there will be a steward stood outside in the hall to let you know whether or not there is someone inside that toilet at that time. Because obviously we don't want you going to queue outside the door opening, and you bumping into someone. That would not be good, would it? So there will be a steward there just to make sure that that is managed well. So monitored by a steward. And you are encouraged to wash or sanitize your hands before and after use of the toilet. So outside there will be hand sanitizers so that you can go in with clean hands, hopefully a pure heart as well, and then you can sanitize afterwards on your way out as well. And obviously use the sinks inside and the soaps that are provided. There's paper towels, which are the best kind to use as well. So it is time for a Q&A. So the intention, the target date, if you like, is the 6th of September as our first Sunday back in the building. Now that's dependent on the cleaning by a professional company being carried out, because we haven't used the building for 5 months now, so it could do with a good clean. We haven't got that definitely confirmed, but the cleaning company said they think they can get it done by the 6th. So as soon as we have absolute confirmation, we'll send out an email and let those who are on email know and make the booking system go live. For those who aren't on the booking system, who aren't online and want to book in, you can either contact someone who is online and ask them to book in for you, or you can let me know as well and I'll book you in. So yes, we'll let people know as soon as we've got confirmation that it is going to be the 6th, if it is going to be the 6th, if that makes sense. When you go to book, you'll click on the book now and you'll be taken to a page that gives you 3 dates to book in. So you can book into the 1st Sunday, the 2nd Sunday, the 3rd Sunday of September. Now you could book in for all 3, but given those 3 options, hopefully the person booking will realise that they only have to book for 1. On all of our publicity, we'll encourage people to attend, at least for our members, to attend 1 in free. For all those who attend regularly, for all those who get the emails, they will know that they should only come to 1 in free. But if someone does book for all 3 and we know who they are, like if it was, let's pick on Tom. You don't mind me picking on you, Tom, do you? There we go. Let's say Tom booked in for all 3 services because he didn't realise he was only supposed to book into 1. So it was an honest mistake. Then we would know that he was trying to book in for all 3 and we would email him and say, Tom, I hope you don't mind, but you're only supposed to come to 1 service. So can you pick one of those dates? And he'd have to rebook. So that's how it'd work if someone was booking for all 3. So the booking system limits the bookings to 30 people. Yes. So you can't have more than 30 people book in. And that gives us breathing room of around about 15 people that we can get in who just turn up on the door who haven't booked. So there is a bit of a breathing room that we've deliberately allowed for so that we can get more in the building. No, the stewards won't need to book because the stewards, for example, they need to be on the doors all the time. So they don't need a seat. The preacher and the pianist and the singer, they don't need to book either, nor the people on the media desk. So yeah, they're presumed people. Yes, we are purchasing some masks to be made available for people to put on as they arrive, should people want to. So yes, they will be available alongside the hand sanitizer as you enter. Now, in England, if you're a church that's in England that's opening up, you are required to do this by law. We are actually not required to do this. And the reason for that, from what I understand, is because we are to strictly adhere to 2 meters. And so long as we're adhering strictly to 2 meters, we are not required to keep a register. However, because we're doing a booking system, that will book people in and we will know who has been at the building. And any guests, well, we'll know who they are. We'll want to know who they are. So just for friendly reasons, if nothing else. Yeah, we will have a register, but it will be kept by the booking system. So the same arrangement for collection will be that you put it in the postal box that's now on the car park entrance, shall we say, to the building. So if you've got an offering, that's where it goes, in an envelope with no cash.